Right, welcome everybody. Welcome those joining us online, hybrid. There's an echo coming through the system here somewhere. Okay, can I welcome all members and officers to this meeting? Cabinet, which has been convened as a hybrid meeting. I'm talking to myself at the back of the room, I don't know what's going on. Okay, the meeting has been recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as possible following the meeting. The meeting agenda pack can also be viewed on the Council's website. Everyone participating in the meeting will be attending either in the Council chamber or from remote locations. Cabinet members attending remotely must keep their cameras on for the duration of the meeting. However, all attendees should keep their microphones off until invited to speak. Cabinet members and officers can indicate they want to speak by pressing the hands up icon. I'll now proceed to the agenda business. And we do have a little technical problem in the chamber at the moment with an echo, but we'll try and resolve that now. So we'll move first to item 1, apologies for absence. All cabinet members in attendance, all officers in attendance. Don't think there's any apologies. Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest from officers or members according to the members' code of conduct? No. Okay. Thank you. Moving on then to item 3, which is the outcome of the consultation time to talk budget 2025. I think Carys taking this one, so hand over to you, Carys. Item 3, thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. Just for the sake of the recording, I'm Carys Lord and I'm the Chief Officer for Finance, Housing and Change. So the purpose of this report is to inform Cabinet of the outcomes of the Time to Talk Budget 2025 consultation. The consultation asked citizens their views on what they consider should be the priority areas for allocating the budget for the forthcoming financial year. The public consultation exercise was undertaken over a 3-week period between the 6th of January and the 26th of January this year. Through this consultation, respondents were asked to share their views and priorities across the following areas: the budget awareness campaigns, reducing or removing services, council tax levels, citizen focus, and also any general suggestions that they had. These budget consultation exercises have been undertaken annually since 2013-2014. And this year, for the first time, a budget awareness campaign was run on the Council's social media channels during October and November last year. This was a precursor to the main budget consultation, and its aim was to promote an awareness of the services provided by the Council, how the Council is funded, and also how we set the budget. This year's exercise built on the experience of our previous consultation exercises, using a wide variety of methods to reach people and promote the consultation widely through social media channels as well as through media releases. A wide variety of methods were used to gain people's views, including a quick poll, social media, as well as an explainer video and posters which were placed in all libraries and life centres during the period of the consultation. The audience for this consultation exercise was broad, including the general public and residents of the County Borough area, our citizen panel members, elected members, staff of the Council, businesses and the local media. In total, the consultation received 1,637 interactions from a combination of survey completions, with 1,623 being received via the online survey and 14 being submitted by paper. The survey asked people which services they would not want to see cut and those which they would support a reduction of service level, and these are all identified for you in paragraph 3.82 of this covering report. All of the results of the consultation are detailed for you in Appendix A of this afternoon's report. Therefore, if I could, Leader, I'd just take you to recommendation at section 9, which is that Cabinet note the outcome of the consultation as detailed in the consultation report attached at Appendix A. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Caris, for that. We'll go first, Councillor Melly Evans.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm very happy to move this report. I just want to clarify again, though, that the purpose and aim of this consultation was to seek views on priority areas from our citizens. Therefore, I would like to thank all those who took the time to participate in this budget consultation, as all voices and opinions matter, and all voices and opinions are considered and listened to. We recognise and acknowledge the themes being presented in this report of services in order of priority to protect. And these are as follows, as on page 20. The priorities are, number 1, children, to protect children and young people. Number 2, schools. Number 3, highways. Number 4, ALN. And number 5, vulnerable adults. All input will and has been considered, as it enables us to focus to ensure the difficult decisions being made are representative of those whom we serve. I do, however, have a question, and I note, I note at page 13, the stats indicate we are receiving lots of clicks and hits on emails and platforms. However, these don't seem to be transforming into responses to the survey. Can I ask what plans are in place to improve the response rate in future years? And how are you working towards ensuring the right resource is used on the right platforms to ensure we maximise and improve participation going forward, please?
Okay, Caris.
Yes, thank you for that question. As I said when I introduced the report, we've got about 10 years of experience of doing these surveys, and we do them slightly differently every year based on our experience in previous years. As you can see, we use a lot of our social media platforms. We did a lot this year in getting the message out via our residents' bulletins, via our elected member bulletins to make sure that people promoted it. I think one of the important ways of improving the click rates is that people do realise that we do listen and that we act. And therefore, I think what you just outlined when you spoke, Councillor Evans, it is about reassuring people that it's worth their time in actually completing these surveys. Although I would say this year that the precursor work we did in the autumn, I think may have clarified for some people exactly what the council does and it doesn't do, and that's sometimes been some of the confusion on earlier surveys. So I think we've addressed some of that, but we're always willing to learn. So we will, look at where we had click rates and they didn't follow through. We will have a look to see whether there's anything further that we can do to encourage people actually to actually sit down and respond to our surveys.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I would like to say, for those who didn't participate this year, you can see that we do actually listen and your opinion does matter. So I would encourage you in future years to actually participate in any budget or any consultations. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the report, it's really, really good. English being my second language, I found it easy to understand, and I just loved all the pie charts and the graphs. It was really made it really easy for me to read. My only question is, from the report, it seems that we didn't do any face-to-face consultation. I'm just wondering, because that's something we usually do. Just wondering what happened this year. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that question. We have used face-to-face consultation in the past, but actually when you look at how much response we get via that, it's always been quite low. We did have some resource issues this year in actually being able to resource that kind of interaction with people. Therefore, it wasn't part of this year's process. However, we did do a lot of work about pushing it out through things like our Refresh Citizens panel to make sure that we pushed it out as far as we possibly can. But I think for next year, we will look at how we can do face-to-face consultation, but in a more constructive way. Now, whether that's actually going to existing groups that exist across the county borough and having a dialogue with them, rather than maybe sitting in a building somewhere in the Bridgend area and hoping that people will come and see us. That hasn't worked well in the past. But I think there's certainly things we can learn. And if we have resources permitting next year, then we would obviously look to try and add the face-to-face consultation to that process.
Yeah, just to say, I think that's really good. It'd be useful to link in with some voluntary agencies because I know they run a lot of groups. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And if I can just speak on the consultation as well on paragraph 3.84 regards the council tax. There's respondents there, and just over half of the respondents are accepting the fact that we need 4.5% council tax or higher to protect services and keep things going in the current sort of format. So, while nobody wants increases, there's an acceptance by the public out there, over half of them, that is required, needed. The one for the future is the question is some of our, we just picked up today with some authorities are sort of considering their social media content in respect of X or Twitter, and how far that continues in the future. Some are starting to discuss whether or not to continue with Twitter accounts or X accounts because of the way that platform seems to be developing in a negative way. So, but we have 21,000 followers, 14,500 English followers of the English Twitter account and 384 on the Welsh Twitter account, where we have 21,500 English Facebook page and 279 on the Welsh Facebook page, which is great. But I suppose in the future we'll have to consider Twitter, X, whatever it's called, where that goes in the future, and what we do with that. Caris?
I think just to say and reassure you, we continue to monitor that. We currently, as you can see, have quite a lot of people across Bridgend who continue to use that platform. But actually the team are continually to scan right across all of the different social media platforms. And we will review them and, start using new ones, maybe drop some existing ones, depending on the kind of reach that they're having on our behalf, really. So certainly X at the moment is one that we are monitoring quite closely.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Caris, for that reassurance. And the report before it's been moved and seconded. All in favour of the recommendation? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on then to item 4, which is the medium-term financial strategy 2025-26 to 28-29. Back to you, Caris.
Thank you very much, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to present to you the medium-term financial strategy for the period 2025-26 through to 2028-29. So that includes the financial forecast for the full period 2025 through to 2029, also a detailed revenue budget for the coming financial year, and the capital programme for the period 2025-26 through to 2034-35. So the Council's corporate plan is aligned to the medium-term financial strategy, with explicit links between the Council's wellbeing objectives and the resources directed to support them. It is clear that the challenging financial situation the Council faces and the level of budget and service cuts that need to be made will inevitably restrict the ambitions and objectives set out in the corporate plan for the coming year, but maybe also beyond that. So in light of this, the Council is reviewing its corporate plan delivery plan for 25-26, making it clear that budget pressures continue and that the Council still needs to move towards a new operating model. The medium-term financial strategy details a number of issues, including the 13 key principled and detailed assumptions which drive the Council's budget and spending decisions, the financial context within which the Council is operating, and tries to mitigate any financial risks and pressures going forward, whilst at the same time taking advantage of any opportunities that may arise. So the strategy focuses on how the Council intends to respond to the increasing pressures on public sector services. The pressures being experienced in this Council are reflected right across the public sector in Wales and beyond. Over the last few years, these pressures have been unprecedented, and they are impacting on all service across this local authority. The strategy details the approaches and the principles the Council will follow to ensure that it remains financially sustainable and delivers on our corporate wellbeing objectives. The quarterly reports to Cabinet on the projected revenue position for this financial year have outlined in detail the impact on the budget of the significant pressures faced by the Council throughout the year. The Council has experienced an increase in demand for services, together with increased costs as a result of the worsening economic climate, rising inflation and interest rates. These have been reflected in rising prices, higher than anticipated pay increases, and significant tender price increases for goods and services. So the financial position for the Council has changed during the current year. At the end of Q2, the projected overspend for the current financial year was £6.7 million. At the end of Q3, the outturn for the year was projected to be an underspend of £6.8 million. And within these figures, there remains a projected overspend by services of £7 million, whilst council budgets are predicted to underspend by some £13.8 million. This change in position is due to a number of issues, partly due to the recent notification of a number of additional grants totalling £3.3 million towards pay awards from Welsh Government following the autumn budget. It is also due to a council-approved change in our policy for the financing of capital, a lower drawdown on contingencies, and the maximisation of other grants against service costs. It should be noted that this position is masking some of the record pressures that still exist in directorate budgets and will continue into the new financial year. Whilst some of these additional pressures are not recurrent, a number will be, and they will become core pressures for the Council going forward, and these are now reflected in the medium-term financial strategy. The final financial settlement for local government in Wales is not due to be announced until the end of February. Therefore, this budget is being proposed on the basis of the provisional settlement, which we received back in December 2024. Changes in the final settlement, such as the transfer in of specific grants and possible additional funding, will be reported to Council in due course, but that would not affect the council tax level. In finalising the medium-term financial strategy and the budget for the coming year, estimates have been made which take into account circumstances and events which exist or are reasonably foreseeable at the time of preparing the budget. The budget has been prepared following consultation with elected members, the School Budget Forum, service managers and the public. And subject to the risks identified, the medium-term financial strategy provides a firm basis for managing the Council's resources for the coming financial year and beyond. If I may, Leader, I would just take you to Annex 3, which is the detailed medium-term financial strategy, in order to draw members' attention to some of the key information within that document. Section 1 of the strategy includes a financial overview for the Council. Members will be aware that the Council has had to make budget reductions in previous years, and the budget reductions of almost £88.4 million have been found since 2010-2011. And these details can be found in Chart 1, which is on page 61 of your pack. These cuts have not been made equally across all service areas. However, in total, they do represent almost 20% of the Council's current net budget. The Council receives the majority of its revenue funding from Welsh Government through the Revenue Support Grant and a share of the non-domestic rates. This is supplemented through the Council tax collection, other grants, and also fees and charges. It's important to note that Council tax currently only accounts for 28% of the net budget of this Council. In Section 2 of the strategy, further context is provided, detailing both financial and non-financial information which has shaped the financial position of the Council. In real terms, Welsh Government funding has fallen year on year since 2012-2013, with an increase in element of the budget having to be funded via the Council tax. Planning for the financial year 2025-26 has been more challenging than usual due to the exceptional issues already referred to in the current financial year. Due to the continuing pressures presenting themselves, there are fewer opportunities to reduce services in a climate that requires more support for our older and more vulnerable members of society, and with a substantial increase in demand being experienced for so many of our services. In addition, there are higher expectations on the Council to address homelessness more robustly and on a longer-term sustainable basis, and more pressure to strengthen and support social care, which is experiencing increased demand and costs, as well as more complex cases in both children's and adult services. As in previous years, further efforts have been made to secure greater involvement of stakeholders in the development of this strategy, and this has included a 3-week consultation with residents of Bridgend, which you've just looked at in the previous agenda item. It's also engagement with Cabinet and Corporate Management Board have been working with the Budget Research and Evaluation Panel to facilitate the budget planning process. And the draft budget report approved by Cabinet in January this year has subsequently been very well scrutinised by the Council scrutiny committees, resulting in a report to Cabinet on the 4th of February from the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee outlining a number of recommendations. Cabinet has considered these, which include recommendations from the Budget and Research and Evaluation Panel, and a response to these is provided for you in Appendix A to the Medium-Term Financial Strategy this afternoon. The responses received from the public consultation and from discussions with and recommendations from the Budget Research and Evaluation Panel and Scrutiny Committees. These have been considered, and the proposed budget is based on those comments and the responses that have been received. The final budget has been compiled based on the comments and responses received and has prioritised safeguarding and protection of our most vulnerable citizens, seeking to move to a full cost recovery model where we're able to do so, continuing to provide support for homeless individuals, and also reviewing the use of our assets and our buildings. So details of the proposed budgets for individual services are given for you in section 2.4 of the strategy. In section 3 of the strategy, the current financial situation is outlined for you. With regards to the provisional local government settlement, the headline figure was an overall increase of 4.3% across Wales, and for Bridgend, there was an increase of 4% for the coming financial year. However, since the publication of the provisional settlement, Welsh Government have identified a small flaw in the settlement comparisons for 24-25 relating to the transfer in of the housing grants. As a result, the updated comparison is still 4.3% across Wales, but is now a 3.9% increase for Bridgend. Based upon these updated figures, the range of uplift across Wales varies from 2.6% to 4.9%. For Bridgend, this 3.9% increase results in a £10.6 million increase in funding after specific transfers. This was the 13th highest increase across all Welsh authorities, and it is illustrated for you in chart 4 within the medium-term financial strategy. The strategy also models for you the financial position for the authority for the next 4 years based on the latest information available from Welsh Government. Welsh Government has not given an indication of the possible settlement figures for the period after 25-26. The current financial outlook is that future settlements are likely to be challenging for local authorities, as the new monies for Welsh Government from the autumn statement have been allocated in 2024-25 and 25-26. As a result, it's predicted there's likely to be a 0% change to the funding for local government after 25-26. So the financial forecast for the period 2026 to 29 has been predicated on assumptions regarding demographic projections, inflationary uplift, the impact of new legislation and policies, and also increased staffing costs. In developing these estimates, the strategy contains assumptions with regards to possible council tax increases going forward. Due to the pressures already outlined, it is proposed to increase council tax by 4.5% in 2025-26. If council tax did not increase, the Council would need to make further budget reductions of around £4.9 million to balance the budget, in addition to the £8.3 million which is proposed in this strategy. For planning purposes, it's been assumed that the council tax will increase by 4.5% in each year from 2026-27 through to 28-29. I must stress these figures are for planning purposes only, and they will be reviewed each time the medium-term financial strategy is updated. Together with the indicative funding from Welsh Government, it's estimated that there will be a budget reduction requirement of £39.5 million to be met over this 4-year period. These scenarios are detailed for you in Table 7 within the strategy. The Council's corporate risk assessment identifies the key corporate risks and mitigating actions and is included within your papers. This was updated in January, and the level of overall risk for the authority remains high, which reflects the current service and financial demands that the Council is having to address. The revised corporate risk assessment was considered by the Governance and Audit Committee in January, and these risks have been taken into account in the preparation of the strategy. Again, the corporate risk assessment is attached to your papers this afternoon. So Section 4 of the strategy outlines in more detail the budget position for 25-26. The net budget requirement for the next year is detailed at Table 9 of this report, which shows a net budget of £383.3 million. The proposed allocation of this budget across services is detailed for members at Table 10, which is page 94 in your pack. This table does detail the funding pressures and the savings to be made by each directorate within this budget proposal. This year, in addition, another table has been included in the strategy outlining the net increase in funding for schools, which is proposed for 2025-26. This is at Table 12 in your report and shows a net increase of £7.9 million. When the draft budget was presented in January 2025, there was uncertainty regarding the additional costs associated with the increase for staff employers NI, which would have to have been funded by this authority. The cost of this increase for staff directly employed by the Council is estimated to be £4.7 million, and it has been assumed that this funding will be met by Welsh Government, although this will not be confirmed until the spring. The position with regards to the funding, the increase for commissioned providers, is less certain, and therefore a provision has been made within this proposed budget to fund that pressure to enable us to continue to support those services. In summary, the key points to note within the proposal for next year is that financial pressures of over £23.9 million are funded in the coming financial year, and these include £9.5 million to meet pay and price inflation, £14.4 million of service cost pressures, and this includes recurrent base budget pressures of £9.4 million. These relate to service overspends in the current financial year, which services are not going to be able to reduce, and therefore this proposal brings their budget up to spend. But also there's a further £5 million of new emerging pressures included in there. This funding is supporting some of the most significant pressures that the Council is facing, including the costs associated with supporting and protecting our most vulnerable residents, especially children, support for children with additional learning needs, funding to meet contractual price increases, especially home-to-school transport, increased costs of commissioned services in the social care sector following the increases in the real living wage and in the national living wage, and also an increase in the Fire and Rescue Authority's levy on the Council to meet pay and price increases. And members can find details of all of those cost pressures at Appendix C. Also then, in order to balance the budget, reductions of £8.3 million have been identified. Some of these have been approved by Cabinet or Council during the financial year, and these are shown at Table 13 in your strategy. Since the draft MTFS was presented to Cabinet in January, the savings have been reviewed, and savings relating to the school music service have been removed from the final budget proposals. Therefore, the savings have been reduced by £726,000. Details of all of the proposed savings are shown for you in Appendix D of the strategy. Members will be aware that South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority is funded by raising a levy on its constituent councils, which is based on population. Within the strategy, reference is made to this at paragraph 4.1.23. The levy payable for the coming financial year is £9.5 million, which is an increase of 391,000 over last year's. This increase has to be paid for via the Bridgends council tax rise. The council does raise income via fees and charges, and these are reviewed on an annual basis. New charges or charges that have been included in the 25-26 budgets and are above the general increase are shown in Appendix E. As well as the revenue budget, this strategy also deals with the proposed capital programme for the period 2024-25 through to 2034-35. This 10-year programme has been revised during the financial year to bring it up to date and to take into account of new capital schemes as they've been identified. Within the Welsh Government provisional settlement for the coming financial year, £8.6 million has been made available to support capital expenditure. Due to the limited capital finances available, services have not been asked to submit bids for funding at this stage. In addition to limited funding levels, there are significant pressures within the capital programme overall, which have been reported to members throughout the year, and it includes the increased costs of materials as a result of higher inflation rates, some supply chain difficulties which still exist, problems in recruiting to key posts both within the council and in the companies that we contract with. So the capital programme contains a number of annual allocations totalling £5.2 million that are met from the total general capital funding for the council. The proposed allocation of these for the coming year is shown in Table 15. The only proposed change to these is to increase the allocation for disabled facility grants to enable the council to support more people to remain in their own homes. Within today's report, two changes are proposed to the current capital programme, which are to fund the Bridgend West School development and also to utilise a Welsh Government grant relating to electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Within the Welsh Government's draft budget, there was a reference to the introduction of a Highways Management Local Government Borrowing Initiative. Through this initiative, Welsh Government indicated that they would be investing £5 million of recurrent revenue monies to enable local authorities to self-finance approximately £60 million of capital funding, which is to be spent on highways management and fixing our local roads. The details of how much of that funding will be allocated to Bridgend Council has not been received for 2025-26. This will be included within the capital programme once confirmation of that funding is received. Any further new proposals for capital funding will be considered in light of and in line with the proposed capital strategy for this period, and it will be brought back to Council for approval at a later date. So the revised capital programme is outlined for you at Appendix G. In accordance with the Council's Reserves and Balances Protocol, a review of the Council's reserves is undertaken at regular intervals. Members will find a breakdown of the movement on the reserves at the time at Appendix H of today's report. It is anticipated that there will be a drawdown from a number of reserves during the financial year, particularly in this last couple of months, including an estimated drawdown from the capital programme reserves to support the school's capital maintenance grant, expenditure towards maintenance schemes within schools, and £1 million for the Coity Primary Extension. We will also draw down £180,000 funding for feasibility studies, and also further £2 million from Directorate earmarked reserves and £800,000 from the Equalisation and Grant earmarked reserves. In line with the reserves protocol, a further review will be undertaken at the end of the current financial year, and transfers will be made at this point, taking account of the overall financial position of the council, including our final outturn position, our actual council tax income, earmarked reserve levels, the council fund level, and any new pressures or risks that need to be provided for. So a summary of the earmarked reserves is shown for you at table 16 this afternoon. With regards to the council tax, the proposed budget of 383 million shown in table 10 of the strategy can be balanced with an increase in the council tax of 4.5% for the coming financial year. This level of increase is needed to enable the council to set a balanced budget. It takes into account the current budget position, the already significant levels of service reductions that will be required, and ongoing budget pressures, along with the challenging financial forecast going forward. The final section of the medium-term strategy provides information on the council's longer-term financial outlook. This is not intended to be a 10-year budget strategy due to the number of variables that impact on our financial position. However, it does provide a financial framework to reference against when preparing both annual and longer-term financial positions. So, Leader, if I could, I would just take you to section 9 of the report and the recommendations there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Caris, for that comprehensive review of where we are after many, many months of great work being done by your team and all teams across all directorates. So thank you for that, because it's something we've been working on for a long time and we'll continue to work on in the future. I'll go now to Councillor Howard-Williams first.
Thank you, Leader. And can I move the recommendation at 9.1 of the report, and thank officers, in particular Caris and the Corporate Management Board, for all of the work that they've put into producing this document. And I thank my Cabinet colleagues and also the backbenchers and the respondents to the budget consultation. Everyone has an opportunity to input into this report here this afternoon, and I thank them sincerely for their contribution. There have been many, many meetings to produce this report this afternoon, beginning back in the early summer. The initial assumptions identified a very challenging and bleak time ahead for the Council. There were hundreds of hours committed to assessing all the available information to formulate what we have before us this afternoon. I believe this process has been fair and open, with regular briefings to all members across the Council. And since the settlement has been announced just prior to Christmas, the Cabinet have published its draft budget on the 4th of February for the public and scrutiny to comment and offer amendments. And the Cabinet's amendments, the Cabinet have provided a response to scrutiny recommendations at Appendix A of the report. I'm very pleased to say that the music service can continue. That is our recommendation. The number of representations that we have received has been unprecedented for a particular service change. And we have certainly listened to those representations, and we absolutely understand that the value of the music service has to those pupils that undertake that service. It's clear that everyone has a talent, and I think it's the job of the schools to find that talent and nurture that talent. And if your talent is in music, then it's quite right that we provide the right tools, I suppose, to develop and nurture that talent. And so we're very pleased that we can retain a music service for the pupils of Bridgend County Borough. So just, I'm not going to say too much this afternoon, because obviously this is going to Council now next week, but I believe that this budget sets the right balance. I believe it keeps residents safe, it supports the Council's corporate plan and our well-being objectives, and it minimises the impact on the Council taxpayer. So I'm happy to move the report, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'm going to go to the Deputy Leader next.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you very much, Caris, and your team. I support and commend your team for the amount of work that you do, particularly in relation to finance. It can't be easy with everybody sitting on this in this arena, challenging you at every opportunity, is what I want to say. But I am content to support the MTFS to go before full Council next week for debate and agreement. I believe it evidences all the consultation and engagement with residents has been considered fully. And I am really pleased that we are proposing our music service is maintained due to its value in promoting well-being with our young people. But I acknowledge the difficulties that our schools are representing. However, as Chair of Governors, we were going into a deficit position pre any budget decision prior to our budget meeting last year in Council, which indicates to me that the behaviours being evidenced by our pupils and following the implementation of the ALN Act, that which we were assured as members of Council would be cost neutral, it definitely has not been, and I believe that we need a review of school and education finance here in Bridgend County Borough so that clear accountable evidence can be given to Welsh Government colleagues to support our claim, noting the pressures and reductions in our appendices as well. But I'm more than happy to second. Thank you very much, Leader.
Good Deputy, that's been moved and seconded. We'll move next to Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you, Cerys, to you and your team and Deb for all the hard work you've gone in there. A couple of questions from me, if that's okay. I'm looking at table 10 on page 94, and we've got here, we asked all the directors to do reduction from there, to propose some reduction. But notice then, we've also got the budget pressures here, so we're taking from one hand but giving it to the other end. If I just look at education just as an example, so education proposal was a budget reduction of 2,600,000 something, and yet the pressure requested that we're hoping we're going to be proposing next week is 2,700,000. So technically, education is having an increase. If you look at that table there. The other question I had was for Lindsay. I still want us to go back and look at the counselling services. So I just want to know, how are we going to mitigate the risk that you've put into some of the paperwork in here? Thank you.
Thanks, Leader. Thanks, Councillor Farr. For the purpose of recording, I'm Lindsay Harvey. I'm the Corporate Director for Education Areas and Young People. I think there are two very important points there, Councillor Farr. First of all, with regard to the overall budget pressure position, the papers do indicate a significant investment in a number of areas for our schools, not least in support for learners with additional learning needs, and specifically for some additional support with regard to learning resource centres. So again, some really pleasing budget pressure relief that we are seeing for education there. With regards to the other areas, obviously this has been very, very difficult in a lot of the cuts that we have been proposed here today, not just in my directorate but in other areas. But the commitment we can give is where we see these valued services that are at the moment, that we will continue to work with other partners, Welsh Government in particular, and to make sure that we mitigate any impact on the children and young people and squeeze maximum value out of all grants to mitigate that. And this is one ongoing discussion with Welsh Government officials that we're seeking to do that, Councillor Farr.
Is that in particular to the counselling services?
Thanks, Leader, for clarity. Yes, Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Councillor Farr. No, there's just a couple of points. Cerys, you did mention the South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, which is interesting, and that's something perhaps we need to, well, it's clear in the report, but shout a bit more the fact that of nearly 400k, and it's almost 0.5% of the council tax. Is, so council tax provides a lot more than just Bridgend County Borough council services. There's other services out there which people surely value, the fire service, but that's part of the council tax. But the music service, as been touched on, it's the largest response I've seen to a single line in the budget in my time, 25, 26 years here. The large response from pupils, parents, school teachers, which is great. People have shouted, they've heard their voice made, and we're listening, and we're now proposing to take that cut away, albeit accepting the fact there still needs to be a review of the music service going forward, see how best that can be modelled. But that cut is no longer being proposed to be made. That's down to council next week. We recommended the budget to council. The council takes the ultimate decision next week, and hopefully all members will vote in favour of keeping the music service next week. But we have gone through, which was pointed out, 88 million of cuts. It's hard to believe, since 2010, 14 years ago. 15 years, and still 39 million cuts to come over the next 4 years. There's still a lot of work to be done. But there's budget growth and service pressures being built into this, which is positive. And just one in particular, the TFGs, we're looking to increase by £500,000 for the disabled facilities grants. So some great budget items in there, albeit some challenges with cuts as well. And the capital highway investment, we'll have more details on that once Welsh Government formally announce the money is available there to deal with our highways, whether that's potholes or infrastructure out on our highways, which again has come out through the consultation, what people value, what people want to see us taking action on. So we are listening to people out there, the public. We are doing the best we can in challenging times, thankfully. Could have been a lot worse. Thankfully, the Labour government in Westminster and Labour government in Wales, they've given us the best settlement they could with the resources available. And I think there's a great job being done. And it's been moved and seconded. And we now recommend the items as in 9.1 to full council for next week. I'm sure there'll be a lot more time to discuss various elements of the budget and the proposals next week. I think it's been moved and seconded. We're all in favour now. Let's recommend this to full council next week. Okay, thank you, and thank you, Caris, again. Move on to the next item, item 5 then, the Capital Strategy 25-26. Back to you, Caris.
Thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to present to Cabinet the capital strategy for the period 2025-26 through to 2034-35, which includes the prudential indicators against which we measure ourselves during the financial year, and also the annual minimum revenue provision statement, and before submitting all of these to Council for approval next week. So local authorities are required to determine a capital strategy which demonstrates that the authority takes capital expenditure and investment decisions in line with service objectives and properly takes account of stewardship, value for money, prudence, sustainability and affordability when making these decisions. And this strategy must be approved by full council. We should have a capital strategy in place that sets out the long-term context in which capital expenditure and investment decisions are made, and gives due consideration to both risk and reward and the impact on the achievement of our priority objectives. So the strategy should set out the principles to be used to guide the allocation of capital investment across all of our services and informs decisions on capital spending priorities. It also reports on the delivery, affordability and the risks associated with the strategy. So the proposed capital strategy up to 2034-2035 is attached for you at Appendix A this afternoon. It sets out the Council's plan for capital expenditure and how the programme is to be funded over the coming 10 years. In developing long-term investment decisions, it is crucial that decisions are based on clear information, including a long-term plan of service priorities and management plans. Where capital investment is needed to deliver the Council's priority, this strategy is the framework that the Council can rely on to develop a clear, consistent and informed process in undertaking capital investment decisions. This document is presented as an integral part of the Council's budget and policy framework, and it links with the corporate plan, the Treasury Management Strategy, the medium-term financial strategy and the Council's asset management plan. There are 13 principles which drive the budget and spending decisions of this Council, and 3 of these refer specifically to the capital programme. They are that capital investment decisions are in alignment with the Council's capital strategy and mitigate any statutory risks taking account of return on investment and sound options appraisals. That prudential borrowing is only used to support the capital programme where it is affordable and sustainable within the Council's overall borrowing limits and the revenue budget over the longer term, and that decisions on the treatment of surplus assets are based on an assessment of the potential contribution to the revenue budget and the capital programme. To reflect this, the capital strategy is based on the following guiding principles. The capital investment is focused on the delivery of the Council's wellbeing objectives and priorities. It's to ensure that we have strong governance and over decision making, to ensure that capital plans are affordable, sustainable and prudent, and finally to maximise and promote the best use of the available funds. The plan details how any proposed investments in land and buildings will require the completion of a full feasibility study to evaluate the practicality of the capital project and to assess its deliverability before the Council invests time and money into that project. The strategy notes that there are a number of significant areas that will need financing going forward, including economic recovery, decarbonisation and homelessness, digitalisation and some of our coastal defences. As reported to Council throughout this year, there are other financial pressures arising in existing schemes within the programme, and it's anticipated that this will continue for some time going forward. The strategy also refers to the changes with regards to the ability to borrow from the Public Works Loan Board to invest primarily for financial return. When seeking to borrow from that board, authorities will be asked to confirm that there is no intention to buy investment assets primarily for yield in the current or in the following 2 financial years. Whilst this does not preclude the Council investing in commercial activities, investing in assets solely for yield would prevent the Council from accessing the Public Works Loan Board borrowing. As the Council will need to borrow to support the 21st Century Schools Band B programme and the wider capital programme, this will prevent the Council investing in land or property purely to achieve financial return. Also, a new international financial reporting standard is now in place which requires the Council to recognise assets and liabilities for leases over 12 months. And the details of these are included within the strategy at pages 206 and 207 of today's papers. Major capital projects require careful management to mitigate the potential risks which can arise. The effective monitoring, management and mitigation of these risks is a key part of managing the capital strategy. In section 3 of the strategy, details are contained which outline the robust process in place to approve, manage and monitor capital projects. As members are aware, quarterly capital monitoring reports are prepared for both Cabinet and Council, which include details of any variances between projects, as well as projections of likely year-end spend. In 2025-26, the Council's planning capital expenditure of £107 million, and this is summarised for you at Table 2 within the Capital Strategy document. The main capital projects to be undertaken in that period include work on a number of our schools under the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, work on the Porthcawl Grand Pavilion, work on disabled facility grants, playground refurbishments and highway refurbishments. So the Council has several funding streams available to support capital investment, and these are detailed for you in Appendix 1 of the strategy, and that's at page 229 of your papers. The Council does receive support from Welsh Government towards the cost of capital, and this funding is prioritised towards investment that's required to meet health and safety requirements. There are currently no nationally imposed restrictions to the level of borrowing that the Council can incur to pay for capital investment, but the Council must be able to repay any debt that it has, and this is a key element of any decision to borrow funds. The Council approves its own affordable borrowing limit. We have 2 types of borrowing that we can use to pay for capital investment, and these are supported borrowing, where the costs of serving that debt is included within the annual revenue support grant that we receive from Welsh Government. And the second type is unsupported borrowing, and the cost of that has to be met from our Council's revenue budget. Finally, each year the Council must set aside a provision for repaying their external debt, and this is known as the minimum revenue provision. The minimum revenue provision needs to be approved by Council before the start of each financial year, and this can be seen at section 7 of your report. When agreeing the Council's capital programme, members must be aware of the revenue impact of capital schemes, which would either include the costs of operating or maintaining a new asset, or the capital financing costs of servicing any borrowing required to pay for that investment, and then the revenue costs of preparing and delivering a project. The percentage of the Council's revenue budget that's committed to capital financing costs is increasing in the longer term, And given the pressure on revenue budgets, this limits the affordability of other priorities in future years and should be a factor considered by members when determining our capital programme. So if I may, Leader, I just refer you to the recommendations at section 9 of the covering report this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caris. And the capital strategy for next year, 25-26 onwards, Councillor Caparros.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Thank you for that report, Caris. Happy to move. That's acceptable. Yeah, happy to move the report. So you touched on earlier about the International Financial Reporting Standard 16 for leases, and you said there's a requirement that we have to recognise a right of use asset as an asset and also an equivalent lease liability, thus balancing themselves out. However, the report does note there are increases to our capital finance requirement and an impact on the minimum revenue provision. I wonder if you could explain in a little bit more detail for us, what are the material impacts of this beyond just the reporting? And do we need to take any action in future years to ameliorate the risks or costs?
Thank you for the question. This is really a bit of a technical adjustment really to the way in which we account for leases more than anything else. So they do now have to show within our, as you said, our capital financing requirement, and we do have to report them more fully in our accounts when we close our accounts at the end of the year, because then we're truly reflecting the assets that the council are using in order to deliver their services. But the reality is when we lease usually a vehicle or a property, the lease rental costs are already showing in our revenue account. So that when we say in here it's got a net nil value, those leases that we currently have are fully funded within our revenue budget. But what it does mean as we move forward, we probably need to be more sighted on that when we look at how are we going to acquire our assets. Are we going to purchase them? Are we going to rent them? Are we going to lease them? And we have to be very mindful of those decisions from both a capital perspective. In other words, have we got the approvals through our capital financing requirement to meet those costs? But equally, can we afford to fund them via our revenue account?
Caris, thank you, Councillor Caparros. Councillor Howard-Williams.
Yeah, just very briefly, Leader. Thank you, Caris, for presenting the report. The capital programme, I think we've got a very good track record of delivering some very exciting capital projects over the last 10 years. And what's in the report this afternoon provides a very bright future for us as well. Our investment in our schools education and on the Grand Pavilion in Porthcawl is going to be some very exciting projects for the future. So I'm happy to move or second the report for presentation to Council next week.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. And I want to take the opportunity as well to repeat again the good news in here with the capital programme, the projects that are there, which we, are brilliant. What's happening, what's proposed. We have sustainable communities for learning with Heasons Bridge, Mynydd Cymvig, Ysgol Brogo, and Bridge End West. In addition, as Councillor Williams has touched on, what's called Grand Pavilion, the disabled facilities grants touched on earlier, put an extra £500,000, the waste recycling vehicles, playground refurbishments and highways refurbishments. All great news, producing and giving results for the people out there. So some really positive projects, and that's just a few. There's a lot more in there in the appendices, line by line. So thank you for that. It's been moved and seconded. I think it's a great report. We go in the right direction. Are we all in favour of putting this to council next week? Thank you. Okay, thank you for that, Caris. Item 5, the next item then, Treasury Management Strategy, 25-26. Back to you, Caris.
Thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to present to you the Treasury Management Strategy for the coming financial year. And that includes our borrowing strategy for 2025-26, our Treasury Investment Strategy for the same year, and also the Treasury Management Indicators. And again, this suite of documents needs to be presented to Council for approval. So the Treasury Management functions of the Council are regulated by the Local Government Act 2003. This Act provides authorities with the powers to borrow and invest, as well as providing controls and limits on that activity. and in accordance with the Chartered Institute of Public Finance's Prudential Code for Capital Finance, the Council must approve this Treasury Management Strategy before the start of the financial year, and it sets out the Council's and the Chief Financial Officer's responsibilities, delegations and reporting arrangements. So Treasury management activities are defined as the management of the organisation's borrowing, investment and cash flows, including its banking, money market and capital market transactions, the effective control of the risks associated with those activities, and the pursuit of optimum performance consistent with those risks. The proposed strategy for the coming financial year is attached for you Appendix A of the report. The Council does undertake its Treasury management activities in accordance with the Chartered Institute of Public Finance's Prudential Code, and that's been updated to reflect changes in an increasingly complex environment and to complement changes to regulations. The Code requires that formal and comprehensive objectives, policies and practices, strategies and reporting arrangements are in place for the effective management and control of our Treasury management activities, and that the effective management and control of risk are the prime objectives of these activities. So the Council has an integrated Treasury management strategy where borrowing and investments are managed in accordance with best professional practice. The Council will look to borrow money if needed to either meet short-term cash flow needs or to fund capital schemes approved within our programme. It's important to note that any actual loans taken out are not generally associated with particular items of expenditure or assets. The Council is exposed to financial risks, including the potential loss of invested funds and the revenue effect of changing interest rates. So the successful identification, monitoring and control of risk are therefore central to our Treasury management strategy. Should anything change significantly during the year, then a revised strategy will be presented to Council for approval. The ongoing impact on the UK of the war in Ukraine, together with higher inflation, interest rates, uncertain government policy and a deteriorating economic outlook will be major influences on our Treasury management strategy for the coming year. As at the 31st of December 2024, the Council held £99.38 million of borrowing and £42.9 million worth of investment. So the external debt and the investment position are shown for you in Table 1 within the strategy. The Treasury Management Strategy highlights that it is anticipated the Council may need to borrow during the next 3 years. However, this position can change should capital schemes not progress as anticipated, or conversely, whether further schemes are added to the capital programme that are not fully funded by grant or revenue contributions, or new schemes are added which require additional debt funding. The requirement to borrow will need to be monitored on an ongoing basis, and any new borrowing will be considered alongside changes in the capital programme that may affect the level of borrowing required. When borrowing money, the Council's primary objective is to strike an appropriate low-risk balance between securing low interest costs and achieving certainty of those costs over the period for which the funds are required. The strategy outlines that the major objectives for the Council with regards to borrowing in the coming year will include to minimise the revenue costs of our debt, to manage our debt maturity profile so that we have our debt requiring replacement over a period, to reschedule any debt if that's appropriate, but also to optimise the use of all of our capital resources, including borrowing, usable capital receipts, revenue contributions to capital, and also grants and contributions. In November 2020, the Treasury issued revised lending terms for Public Works Loan Board borrowing for local authorities, as I've outlined earlier. And under these new requirements, as the Section 151 officer, I would be required to confirm that the capital expenditure plans do not include an intention by the authority to invest primarily for financial return, and I can confirm that the Council does not intend to invest in that way. As outlined earlier, at the end of December last year, we had £42.9 million worth of investments. The Council's main objective when investing our money is to strike an appropriate balance between risk and return. So we wish to minimise the risk of incurring losses from defaults and the risk of receiving an unsuitably low investment income. The Council may invest its surplus funds with approved counterparties, and these are detailed for you at Table 6 within the strategy. The table also details the time limits and upper financial limits that would apply to each of these organisations. These investments do earn income for the Council, and during 2023-24, this detailed £3.9 million. This year to date, the interest earned on our investments is £1.8 million. It is anticipated that this income stream will reduce as the level of our reserves drops, and therefore the spare money that we have available to invest will equally drop. So during 2025-26, Council will receive reports as required in line with the requirements of the Code of Practice. So this is including the annual Treasury Management Strategy, which you have today, but also a mid-year monitoring report and also an annual Treasury Outturn report. So if I may, Leader, I would take you to the recommendations at Section 9 of this afternoon's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Carys. Thank you for that. I will go first, Councillor Howard-Williams.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Carys, for presenting the report. This is clearly a very technical report, and I'm certainly indebted to yourself and Nigel for keeping the authority safe and within all the approved guidelines. It's very much linked to the capital strategy, and it demonstrates how the authority is going to fund its capital programme over the next 10 years. So I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Caparros.
Thank you, Leader. Happy to second the report. We can see in the report that the maturity profile of debt will see a steady reduction from 25-26 to 28-29. There's clear space for most years from 2035 to 2050. Would I be correct to say that we don't have any shocks incoming in future year maturities, and that thanks to prudent management and low debt-to-head ratio, we are in a strong position to manage future borrowing without an acceptable risk to Council resources? And then if I may, Leader, have a second. Do you want to answer that first, or I'll crack on? Okay, thank you. Okay, I also note, as you touched on earlier, that the Council has set a £10 million limit on monies invested for longer than a year. This is welcome, along with the limiting the amount held for certain categories of groups of investment. But I was wondering if you could explain to me, how do we ensure we have prudent liquidity management to protect access to our cash? And how resilient would we be in future, as there's a lot of global political turmoil at the moment? Say there was some sort of shock in future, like a repeat of the 2008 crisis. How certain are we that we will have access to resources as and when we need them?
Over to you, Carys.
Thank you for those questions. I think in relation to the first one, as you rightly said, our maturity debt profile is spread over a period of time. There are gaps in there where we don't actually have any debt requiring repayment. We will obviously look at some of those gaps if we have to borrow and try and time it so that if we can, we fill those gaps rather than add it, so that in any one year we're holding a large maturity profile, which then puts us at greater risk. And I think that's the way we've always managed our debt portfolio, really, is to minimise the risk to the Council. So one is about how we spread the debt repayments and what the interest rates. The second one is to make sure that we don't have a big bump in any one year where we have to try and manage that cash flow. And we will continue that approach to our debt management going forward. You're right to say that we have limited through our counterparties list and our borrowing requirement what we can place where, how much we can place, and how long we can place it for. We very much take into account the credit ratings for these different organisations, and the reason for doing that, we're spreading our risk. So if there is a problem with one of our counterparties, then actually we've spread our risk and it shouldn't hit us heavily, and that's probably learning that many of us have had because of some of the financial risks that we've had to deal with in the future. So it does make us more resilient. And some of those changes actually have been implemented in the last couple of years, learning from things that have happened. And certainly now, for instance, we don't place any of our money with local authorities who have issued a Section 114 notice. Although you would never expect a local authority to go bankrupt, we wouldn't place our money with an organisation which is publicly saying that it has significant financial difficulties. And we keep up to date with that, and we have Treasury Management advisors as well who advise us. So we do have robust processes in place, the overarching principle being to safeguard that money and to minimise the risk.
Okay, Councillor Caparros, yeah. Right, thanks, Carys, for that. And you've sort of covered an area I want to just comment on as well. So Treasury Investment Strategy, Section 5 of the report, which shows about or talks about surplus funds, which is income received in advance of expenditure, basically. And it's interesting to note that it anticipates in 25-26 a range between 25 to 40 million, with an average rate between 4 to 5%, which is good. It's our money. It's comforting to know our money there is working hard for us, which is great. But even better than that, further down in the report, which is page 256 or 16 of the actual appendice. As of December 24, we held investment properties valued at 4.9 million, with expected return of £500,000 per annum return, which is 9.2% return. You can't get that anywhere in a bank, 9.2%. So it's small investment property, but really working hard for us. So whether it's money in the bank or a couple of investment properties, really working hard there to make sure the money comes back in for us to reuse for the people of the county borough. So some really good examples of work being done well. So, Councillor Caparros, your hand back up. There's legacy hand, is it? Apologies. It's legacy hand, okay. Right, okay, well, it's been moved and seconded. You're all in favour that we approve that? Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is urgent items, which taking nobody has got any urgent items, not been notified of any. So, thank you all for your contributions today. Thank you again for Carys and the team and every across the county borough working hard for this. The reports put before us today. And thank you for everybody online. It's now 15:44, so we'll bring this cabinet meeting to end. And thank you all.